Welcome to Hockey Whiz Talks podcast. Today I'll be talking about whether teams are contenders or pretenders in the NHL playoffs. In this podcast, I'll be talking about all the potential playoff teams and if they are a contender or pretender this season. Contenders and pretenders in the Discover Central Division. Contenders: Carolina Hurricanes and Tampa Bay Lightning. The Carolina Hurricanes are legit contenders in the Eastern Conference this season. They are a very structured team that doesn't make many mistakes and have a couple talented players in the lineup that can make the opponent pay when they make a mistake. Despite not having a legit number one goalie, the Hurricanes have enough talent and skill to contend for a Stanley Cup. The Tampa Bay Lightning are defending Stanley Cup champions, and so for that reason, they are contenders automatically. Tampa should be adding Nikita Kucherov back by the playoffs, and possibly Steven Stamkos as well, so the Lightning will be a force to reckon with come playoff time. Some teams just have that ability to take their game to the next level, and Tampa Bay is one of those teams. Pretender: Florida Panthers. As good as the Florida Panthers have played in the regular season this year, the players on their current roster have very little playoff experience. The Panthers don't match up well against Carolina or Tampa Bay because they don't have enough depth in their lineup. On top of that, they will be playing without their best defenseman in Aaron Ekblad. It also doesn't help that Sergei Bobrovsky has struggled in the playoffs in his career. Pretenders: Nashville Predators and Dallas Stars. Both the Nashville Predators and Dallas Stars are pretenders in the Discover Central Division. Nashville is simply not good enough to compete with the top three teams in their division, and Dallas is very inconsistent from game to game, so it is tough to tell which version of the team will show up from game to game. Out of the two teams, I would say that Dallas would do more damage in the playoffs, but if UC Saros plays like he has in the regular season and in the playoffs, Nashville could be a major threat as well. And now a word from our sponsor. Check out my scouting blog at hockeywiz77scouting.com. Listen to my scouting blog podcast on anchor.fm/hockeywiz77scouting. Contenders and pretenders in the Mass Mutual East Division. Contenders: Washington Capitals. The Washington Capitals are the only legit contending team in the Mass Mutual East Division. Washington is the most complete team in the division. They are loaded with talented players up and down their lineup. The only question mark with their team is goaltending, but it shouldn't be a huge issue if the team in front of them is playing well. Pretenders: Pittsburgh Penguins and New York Islanders. The Pittsburgh Penguins and New York Islanders are both good teams, but I wouldn't call them contenders this season. Pittsburgh is not the same team it once was. They don't have the same firepower as they did in previous seasons. However, they are playing much better defensively than they were in previous seasons. The New York Islanders were contenders before the deadline, but since the trade deadline, the Islanders had trouble scoring goals, and their defense isn't as stingy as it once was. Pretenders: Boston Bruins. The Boston Bruins are far from being a contending team this year, but they will always be a competitive team as long as they have the perfection line, David Krejci and Tuukka Rask in goal. Boston matches up better against some teams like the Penguins as opposed to a team like the Capitals. Their success in the playoffs hinges upon who they get matched up against. And now a word from our sponsor. Check out my hockey blog at hockeywiztalkshockey.blogspot.com. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at hockeywiz777. Contenders and pretenders in the Scotia North Division. Contenders: Toronto Maple Leafs. The Toronto Maple Leafs are the only legit contending team in the Scotia North Division. They have a good mix of everything in their lineup, as well as three legitimate star players in Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and John Tavares. The issue with the Maple Leafs is going to be their goaltending, especially if Frederik Andersen is unavailable for the playoffs. The Maple Leafs should have enough firepower to make a deep playoff run in this division. Contender: Edmonton Oilers. The Edmonton Oilers are only contenders because they have two of the best players in the world in Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. These two players can completely change the complexion of any game or series they play in. If Mike Smith continues to play like he has in the regular season in the playoffs, Edmonton will be a force in the playoffs. Pretender: Winnipeg Jets. The Winnipeg Jets are a very good team. However, I think the past 2 weeks have shown that they aren't good enough to match up against Toronto or Edmonton. Winnipeg will still be a competitive team with the core that they have and Connor Hellebuck in goal, but their defense is simply not good enough to contain the superstars on Toronto or Edmonton. Pretender: Montreal Canadiens. The Montreal Canadiens currently hold the final playoff spot in the Scotia North Division. During the regular season, the Canadiens are looking like pretenders, but the Canadiens have the type of team that could pose a challenge in the playoffs, especially if Carey Price is healthy. Even though Montreal isn't considered a contending team, they would be the type of team that could pull an upset on the Maple Leafs in the playoffs. And now a word from our sponsor. Check out my YouTube channel at youtube.com/channel Lucas Aoyang. Contenders and Pretenders in the Honda West Division. Contenders, Vegas Golden Knights and Colorado Avalanche. Both the Colorado Avalanche and Vegas Golden Knights are legit contenders to win the Stanley Cup. These two teams are exceptionally skilled. Vegas is more physical than Colorado and are better defensively than Colorado as well. But Colorado is the more explosive team offensively and have more team speed. I expect both teams to make deep playoff runs. Pretender, Minnesota Wild. Although the Minnesota Wild have a 31-13-3 record this season, which is good for the 8th best record in the league, I am not convinced that the Minnesota Wild are contenders yet, because part of the reason for their record is because of the division they play in. When Minnesota plays against the top teams in their division like Vegas or Colorado, they don't match up well. Pretenders, St. Louis Blues and Arizona Coyotes. The St. Louis Blues and Arizona Coyotes are vying for the final playoff spot in the Honda West Division. They are both pretenders that will lose to the Vegas Golden Knights in the first round, as neither team matches up well against them. St. Louis would probably give the Golden Knights a tougher time because of the players they have if they were to make the playoffs. Every year, there are surprises, and with how crazy this season has gone, no one can really predict how the playoffs will play out, so we will just have to see to find out.